We now take a quite different perspective and we think about, rather than the current account entries, we think about the financial entries and we think about how the interest rate will give a country different incentives to invest and to save. So in slide 43, we're starting from the national accounting identity, which tells us that income is just equal to consumption plus investment plus net government spending plus exports minus imports plus the net foreign asset position. In previous lectures, we have already worked out the algebra to isolate the current account balance. And if you follow the simple algebra steps of slide 43, we get to having that GNP minus consumptions minus government spending is just equal to the investment plus the current account balance. So on the left-hand side of this expression, we have income, GNP, minus private consumption, which is C, minus G. G is net government expenditure, so it's how much the government spends net of the revenues. So we could call that public consumption. So we have income minus private consumption minus public consumption. That's a measure of how much a nation is saving, and we call that national savings. So then we see that national savings can be allocated to two things. One is investment, and one is the current account balance. Okay, so I can use the national savings either to invest in productive projects, or I can either take some of the national savings abroad, or if the investment is greater than national savings, I will borrow money from abroad. Okay, the last passage is to isolate the current account balance again and get that the current account balance is just given by the difference between national savings and investment. Notice that this relationship so far is just an accounting relationship. We are going to make the hypothesis that national savings and investment are a function of the real world interest rate. This should make sense. So the higher the interest rate, the more I want to save, because if I put $1 away and the interest rate is high, it means that tomorrow I will enjoy those savings plus the interest rate. And so the higher the interest rate, the more I want to invest. Investment, well, when I invest, I'm taking some funds from someone, and in order to convince them to invest in my project, I have to give them a return, which is the real interest rate. If the real interest rate is high, it means that I have to pay out the people that lend me money very much. So the higher the interest rate, the lower my propension to invest. If the interest rate is very low, that's a good time to invest because the cost of my investment represented by the interest rate is low. So we've just described two functions of the interest rate. One is positive, and so it's going to look very much like a supply curve. That's the national savings. One has a negative relationship, which is the investment, which is going to look very much like a demand curve. And we represent them together in slide 45. We see that they meet when the interest rate, in this example, the real interest rate, is equal to 3%. That would be the point at which national savings are equal to investment, which means that the current account balance is exactly zero, and so this would be the situation that would emerge in a closed economy. Suppose that our economy is a small economy and that our national saving and our national savings and our investment don't influence the level of the world interest rate. Then we can imagine that if the world interest rate is greater than 3%, and at slide 47 we're seeing an example in which the world interest rate is at 5%, then there will be an excess supply, if you want, of national savings compared to the investment. So at 5%, there are not many people that want to invest because the cost of investment is very high, but there are a lot of people that want to save. The difference is just a current account balance surplus. At slide 48, we see that if the interest rate is lower than the real interest rate that would emerge in the closed economy, then a lot of people want to invest, but there are not so many savers. And so how do we finance this excess of investment compared to national savings? Well, foreigners will have to pour money in and lend us money to mind this gap, and so that will be a current account deficit.